Another thing we always look forward to is a chat with Pat.
Yeah, and today I'm really excited about this article. It was in First Things, a Pope for the AI Era, and it was written by Father Bill McCormick, a Jesuit. Hello, Father Bill. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, I love this article. And you talk about... Yeah, you talk about Leo the 13th. You make these kind of connections in the article, and you talk about the three necessary societies that he writes on: marriage and family, the polity, and the church. And you state that all of these are needed to satisfy our human ends. But then you go on to talk about the challenge of AI. And so, how does AI challenge us in our humanity, and how does it affect these three areas that Leo the 13th wrote about?
That's a fantastic question. I think artificial intelligence, like any kind of technology, forces us to ask questions about who we are as human beings. If we're going to ask the question, how ought this technology to be integrated into our lives, what kind of goods we want it to propagate, what kind of evils or negative costs we want to mitigate, then we can't avoid the question of who is this for? And as Christ says, the Sabbath is for man. And so in that sense, we want AI to be for man, for the whole human family. I think one of the specific challenges of artificial intelligence is it's coming at a time when human beings are increasingly isolated from each other. Yeah. Right, and we live in our own individual little echo chambers where perhaps we're not experiencing that kind of human communion that we want to experience through the family, through the politics, and through the church, and of course, so many other areas. So one of the challenges of artificial intelligence is just how do we experience ourselves and one another as children of God, as living in these communities that we are trying to serve. So, in other words, I think a lot of people are rightly looking for solutions and answers to the problems of artificial intelligence. But when we live in isolation from one another, when we don't experience communion with other people, then we have a hard time even articulating the problems themselves that arise, how AI affects church and faith and marriage and family life.
And you mentioned in here kind of this, I think you called it a disturbing pattern that we're finding in this kind of post-industrial West, and that we almost want virtual versus reality. Can you kind of give us a little bit more on that, and how does that affect us then? And you kind of touched on it with isolation, but can you expand that just a little bit more, this disturbing pattern of kind of wanting the virtual? What does that say about us?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, there are many gifts. God has given us many, many gifts through modern civilization, but we also have to deal with a lot of its challenges. And one of those challenges is that we have a lot of people in the world today, especially in the West, not least in the United States, who live lonely, isolated lives, who don't have a lot of contact with other people. And technology is increasingly how we mediate with the world, how we experience the world. And there are some good things about that, right? The Internet, for instance, joins people from all over the world. Facebook allows me to connect with my friends from my childhood home or high school or whatever. So those are all very good things. But, the other flip side to that is, at least since the 90s, if not earlier, there's this concern, I think, in a lot of the West that we're living increasingly lonely lives, that we're bowling alone, to use the great title of the Robert Putnam book. And so artificial intelligence, in a way, is a new challenge, of course, but it also reinforces these old challenges of how do we get people kind of out of their isolation. And I should add, it's not as though this desire for isolation doesn't come from somewhere. Just for instance, in our politics, we often talk about how a lot of people are polarized and take, very strong political positions they can't argue with each other and dialogue with each other. There are also a lot of people who've sort of become disillusioned with politics in the United States, who have dropped out, or people who in their lives have not experienced, for instance, good, healthy marriages and are discouraged by that, so themselves don't seek marriage. So, I don't want to pretend that these necessary societies are healthy and everything's great. We do have to constantly face that new challenge of how to live a human life in any time.
Do you think, Father, too, that part of that is a virtual, I can control, it's easier, I don't have to struggle through difficulties, and when I engage people, it's going to be messy at some point. So is it sometimes just, it's easier, there are no hassles, it's just me and my virtual reality?
Absolutely. I mean, the first, the original sin was pride, right? And certainly technology often plays to our pride that we can be in control of our world, that we can kind of curate that experience. And in a lot of technology settings, they talk about friction points. What are the little friction points that make, for instance, that make it difficult for somebody to buy a product? So I think a lot of us experience other people primarily as friction points, inconveniences and burdens, as opposed to, human beings are actually part of our lives, the people we're friends with and work with and live with and love. They're not something that we should be able to just sort of cut out of our life in the name of comfort, convenience, efficiency. But that seems to be where we are with some people.
So, Father, do you think this is becoming, obviously, and it sounds like you do because we're talking about AI too, that this is becoming more of an issue in human formation, and then how do we address these issues in human formation?
No, it's a great question. One of the challenges for human formation that we've certainly been talking about in and around the church for some decades is technology allows us to decide who we talk to, who we associate with, and who we don't. So it's so often the case we can go so much of our lives without interacting with people who are different from us, people who disagree with us on things. And obviously that's not the full story. We obviously interact with all kinds of people all the time. But it really is important as human beings that through the family, through schools, through parishes, through workplace, that we really become fully human in all of our rational and moral and psychological capacities, that we're able to interact with people who are different from us but have something valuable to teach us. And this is a truth that the Catholic Church, as Catholics, is so invested in. How do we help facilitate human communion across the broad kind of differences that divide us? So those are some of the enduring struggles, is getting people together in real life, people who disagree with each other, who have different kinds of experiences, but people who represent something of the communion of saints here on earth right now.
Oh, Father, that was excellent. Thank you so much. I would encourage people to read this article in First Things. Pope Leo has his work cut out for him. A Pope for the AI era. Thanks again, Father, for being with us today.